3 hard years of dedication and focus, and I'm back, and I'm just so grateful. That's it.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to see Jon Jones fight at heavyweight. Fuck, he's been saying this since 2013. You either get it done or you don't. He's getting fat for no reason now.
I think if he gets hit once, he'll probably get knocked out of that weight class.
Yeah. This is a comeback. He wants to show the world what he's capable of.
It's been an honor to watch you become the youngest ever UFC champion. It's been an honor to watch you become the heavyweight champion, and I can't wait to see you again. Welcome back, and congratulations on achieving your goal.
Last thing.
The greatest of all time, ladies and gentlemen, Jon Jones!
Don't call it a comeback.
Yeah, I know a lot of you guys are listening to us right now, but for those who are watching, I got a nice little 10, and we just found out that this man, Jon Bones Jones, is back.
Yeah, congratulations on the tan. Congratulations to Bones Jones. He took 3 years off, but it only took 2 minutes for the UFC's GOAT to capture the heavyweight belt.
KD is also back, and the Suns look really dangerous right now. And also, Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley are both coming back to New York next season. But did the Giants overpay a little bit for both of their stars? From Wondery, I'm Ryan Shazier.
And I'm Dave Damashek.
And this is Don't Call It a Comeback.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.
Shek, some people say Jon Jones is the GOAT in the UFC. After last weekend, man, it's pretty hard to disagree.
I hear your noise there. Jon Jones made the scene with a mighty splash way back in 2011 as the youngest UFC champ ever, capturing the light heavyweight title at just 23 years old.
Jones to the body, and it is all over! Jon Jones is the youngest champion in UFC history!
He has the longest unbeaten streak in UFC history. Going into last Saturday night, he hadn't lost a UFC fight since '09. To put that into perspective for you, Shazier, you were getting your driver's license around that time. Either way, as it turns out, the only person who could stop Jon Jones was Jon Jones. Sure, you know, he's got a long history of run-ins with the law, driving with a suspended license, a DUI, a hit and run, and a no contest plea to domestic violence charges. Plus, Jones had his title suspended 3 times because he violated the UFC's drug policy. As an athlete, then, he should be the most celebrated mixed martial artist of all time, but his career has been more defined by wasted potential.
He should be on Nike commercials. Those are the things when you talk about how big and how great Jon Jones could have been had he not had the personal problems. Those are the questions that we'll never know.
After years of a rocky marriage, Jones and the UFC seemed to part ways in 2020 when he voluntarily surrendered his light heavyweight title after going back and forth with Dana White on Twitter. We hadn't seen him since until Saturday.
Presenting the former UFC light heavyweight champion, the one, the only, Johnny
After 3 long years away, Jones returned to the UFC, weighing in at 248 pounds to compete with Cyril Gane for the vacant heavyweight title. After 3 years off, could Jon Bones Jones complete the comeback? Well, yeah, he could, and very easily, I might add, submitting Gane via guillotine choke 2 minutes into the very first round.
Jon Jones! He got the greatest of all time! And now the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world!
So for now, Jones is back, but can he stay out of his own way and maintain his status as the UFC's most dominant champ in this comeback phase? For more on Jon Jones, let's bring in our guest, Megan Olivi, the lead reporter for the UFC broadcast. She was ringside just last Saturday night. Hey there, Megan. Thanks for joining us in an exciting week.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, how you doing, Megan?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well. So I'm a huge UFC fan, and I'm actually excited to talk about this one. So we haven't seen Jon Jones since 2020. And why did he come back so ready for this comeback?
Man, I think that he has honestly been focusing for literal years on heavyweight. When he fought at 205, if you're a UFC fan, you know, there was often talk about him moving up. And then when he finally, walked away from the sport for a little while, I think that's when he made the pivot. He wanted to do things the right way. He didn't want to, just move up and gain a bunch of non-functional weight. So he's been putting in the work for about 3 years, the right calories, the right type of lifting, making sure he didn't lose that explosivity or his cardio. And yeah, he put in the work and it certainly paid off.
Megan, we've talked just before you joined us. It's not a secret that Jon Jones is an imperfect human being. I think that WWE works because it provides a heel. In real world terms, though, how are MMA fans reacting to Bones Jones? Does he present as a heel, someone to root against, or do you think more fans are rooting for him?
It's funny that you ask that, because if you just gave a stranger maybe a list of things that have happened since he's been under the spotlight, you might think he'd be the heel, but the reception from fans was absolutely incredible. I mean, they love him. He is arguably the greatest mixed martial artist of all time. I mean, he is incredibly talented and you cannot deny any of that. And I think that's what resonates with fans, is what he does inside the octagon. So he was met with the biggest cheers at the weigh-ins, the biggest cheers at the fight. He walked second, even though Ciryl Gane was ranked number 1. Usually whoever has the higher ranking will walk second and sort of make their grand entrance. But that was reserved for Jon Jones because he is beloved by fans. They just love watching him perform. Now, however they feel about him as a person, I don't know, but they certainly think he's the GOAT as a fighter.
So I can actually talk a little bit about him as a person. And the one thing that's kind of cool with playing in the NFL before is that sometimes people know you that you don't expect to know you. And so I remember I seen him in a club. It was like a Super Bowl party thing, and he was with his brother Chandler. And I was just walking up with a few guys, and like they got kind of pulled me over. I was like, "Hey, what's up, Ryan? How you doing?" And I was like talking to him. I'm like, "Oh snap!" Like, Jon Jones know who I am, type of thing, and it was kind of cool. Jon took out Gane in 2 minutes. Gone in 2 minutes. Was this a cupcake fight for him, or do you think like he's still that much better than a lot of other fighters?
I think he's that much better. Ciryl Gane has put out almost every person he has come across inside the octagon, and with relative ease. He's had this finesse about him. We've seen him sort of be this new generation of heavyweight that we're calling it. They're athletes and they've watched the sport for a long time. So instead of going into things like football or basketball, they're going into mixed martial arts. And I mean, listen, he doesn't have great wrestling, but he certainly is not an easy out for anyone. And Jon made it look super easy. I mean, he made it look like it was scripted somehow, and it certainly wasn't. I mean, that's how much of an easy night of work that he had. And Ciryl Gane is no joke. I mean, I'm curious to see who he faces when he comes back. But for Jon Jones, he's just that good. Regardless of a 3-year layoff, it didn't even matter to him. He just came out there and returned to old form.
I guess it's a little bit like an NFL quarterback succeeding for a long stretch and then going away for a couple of years and then reemerging with a new team. I don't know exactly how to take Jon Jones stepping up in weight class. Is this hard to do in MMA terms for newbies like me? Are we to be impressed by this, his ability to move that up? Or is it a product of his age and where he is? And is this sort of like a cherry on top of his career, or is this extending his greatness?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's definitely, in my opinion, extending his greatness. It's not just impressive that Jon has succeeded at heavyweight, which, he fought the maximum weight he could be when he defended his title multiple times was 205 pounds. He stepped onto the scale for this heavyweight fight 3 years later at 248 pounds. And if you look at him, sure, he isn't completely shredded because he's not dehydrated or anything, but he's still in phenomenal shape. He didn't just eat empty calories or just kind of lounge around for a while like the rest of us during COVID, apparently. He made sure that he was still athletic about it. When you look at heavyweights in the UFC, they are extremely powerful. They have probably one of the highest percentages of knockouts than any other division. They can compete until they're much older. It seems like the power grows with them as their careers grow. It is one of the, if not the most dangerous weight classes to be in, because it just takes a glance of the chin or the face to go down because of the heavyweight, the size of these men in there. And so for Jon to willingly take that on and sort of look, like Cyril Gahn, when we've talked about him before, look like the athlete, the one who could move like a smaller guy, which is always, as a fighter, what they want. They always say, I wish I could move, like a flyweight or a bantamweight, which are 125 and 135 pounds, but have the power of the size at heavyweight. And so Jon was able to do that. But, mixed martial arts is not like other sports. You only compete maybe 2, maybe 3 times a year. You do so in front of massive amounts of crowd. It's an individual sport. So it's not just that he was able to move up, but he was able to move up, perform impressively in just a couple of minutes after not having those nerves, that type of adrenaline, the actual competition for literal years. I mean, he sat on the sidelines for 3 years and came back like he was gone for 3 minutes.
You guys mentioned that he is just more jacked up to the eyeball than what it was, which is an impressive feat to be able to pack on that many extra pounds. Shazier, or to the both of you, to your eyeball, did he look any slower? Was he diminished at all in terms of quicks?
I didn't think he looked slower. I think he looked like an athlete at heavyweight. And sometimes people get away with not being super athletic at heavyweight. He looked like an athlete at heavyweight. And I don't think he lost a step. Now, it will be interesting to see in his next fight against Stipe, who is more of an athlete, a fellow wrestler, Golden Gloves boxer. I think it will be interesting to see how he's able to move and sort of finesse his way through that fight. But I don't know, Ryan. I didn't think he looked much slower. Did you?
No, to me, he looked exactly like Jon Jones would normally look, just he added 40 pounds, So, Megan, like what you said, with him being out for 3 years, I feel like he intentionally had a plan on what he wanted to do to gain that weight and to be able to come out and fight the same way, because a lot of people, when they do gain that weight, when it comes to boxing, when it comes to fighters, when it comes to football players, when they gain that much weight, you're much more prone to injuries. You don't move the same way. You're not as smooth. And to me, it didn't seem like he was any different than he used to be 3 years ago when he was light heavyweight. Let me get it right. So the biggest thing for me is just I've always loved how Jon fought, and it's because you just never knew what he was going to give you, because he's a phenomenal striker. He's a phenomenal wrestler. He's a phenomenal grappler. He's knocked you out in every different way. And to me, it's crazy to see somebody that big to be that efficient. And it leads right into this next question. And you knew this question was going to come. So Jon, the only loss that he has on his record is a disqualification. And the only person that, Khabib is like one of the only few people that's never lost. Do you think Jon, after this win, it's safe to say he's the GOAT, or you think that, it's still up in the air?
I do. I think he's the GOAT. I think Khabib is in that conversation, of course. I think George St. Pierre is in that conversation. Jose Aldo, Demetrius Johnson. I think all of those athletes are in the conversation to be the greatest. However, I do think that Jon has proved it. He's now competed in 2 different weight classes. He has wins by all different ways, like you mentioned. I mean, crazy submissions, even on Saturday night. Who thought he was going to get Cyril Gahn like that? I mean, that type of submission and that type of tap. He's got crazy knockouts and, 5-round wars. He's kind of got everything where he's displayed his entirety as a mixed martial artist, not just a one-trick pony. And he's able to do everything and face every type of style in an opponent. And, you sort of mentioned Chandler Jones in there. And I just have to say, like, what genetics that Jones family has. Chandler, right. Arthur, and Jon Jones, all just incredible athletes. Their parents certainly did something right, and they are literally just killing the game of athletics. And I know that Arthur is retired now, but it's just phenomenal what they were able to accomplish.
I want to ask you a question. So with Jon, he has that disqualification on his record. Do you feel in this heavyweight division that Jon can finish out his career without losing for self-inflicted wounds? Do you think he can do it?
That's a good question. Listen, he's going to have probably the toughest test of the heavyweight division in Stipe. Stipe is the former champion, very well-rounded, like I said earlier, but he also is coming off a layoff. He hasn't fought for about 2 years. So how will he return? Will it be the same? I'm really also interested to see a matchup with a guy named Curtis Blades, who is just a tremendous, tremendous wrestler. But I do think that Stipe is probably the toughest test for Jon. And if he can get through that one, Curtis could definitely pose a challenge, but I'm not sure if there's a lot of other people, maybe Sergey Pavlovich as well, that are up and comers. But when you fight Jon Jones, I think it's not just about the fight itself and stylistically how you match up or what your game plan is. It's also about, he likes to say things in the press conference, kind of play with people a little bit throughout the lead up to the fight. And then there's a massive amount of eyeballs when you fight Jon Jones, just like if you fight Conor McGregor. And there's a pressure that comes with that. And not everybody is built for that particular pressure. They might be able to compete beautifully inside the octagon on any other given day against any other opponent. But, those are all factors as well that sort of take things up a notch and don't make it just another fight if you fight a guy like Jon Jones.
Well, you were there right at the big comeback, and it's a great comeback in terms of athleticism. It isn't necessarily a great story at this point, given the background that we kind of touched on. Did you pick up the vibe in around there over the couple of days that there is legitimate question about the use of PEDs? Will that plague him going forward? And more broadly, is this comeback a chance, do you think, depending on how it breaks, if everything goes perfectly from here on out, is this a chance for him to put all of that behind him fully? Or
well, listen, I'm sure, as you guys know, sports fans, some of them will never forget every little detail of your life. And, I do want to say that those early troubles he had in life, he's 23 years old, the champion of the world with a crazy spotlight on him. But in terms of the PEDs, for me and everybody that I know, it's absolutely not a question. Jon Jones never struck anyone as a cheater like that. And they did sort of change those guidelines for what he tested positive for. So if he was tested today, that would not be a positive test. So that is something to keep in mind when you sort of look at what happened. And, listen, do I know the intent? Do I know what happened? Absolutely not. I have no idea. But do I think he was using for this fight or would even tempt to use moving forward? Certainly not. And I don't think that's a narrative that anyone else really sees. But as we know, like I said, sports fans never really forget. So I'm sure he'll be reminded of it for the entirety of not just his career, but his life.
So I know we talked about Stipe, and I asked you this question: do you think he'll ever lose? But do you think that this could end up, people would be rooting for Stipe? Because I know a lot of people in Ohio love Stipe, and a lot of people in the country like Stipe. Do you think, this show is all about comebacks? I know Jon made a phenomenal comeback. Do you think that Stipe can do the same thing versus Jon?
I definitely think he can. I think he would maybe get a lot more love than Cyril Gahn, but I don't know if Stipe would get more love than Jon Jones. Like I said, people consider him the GOAT, so they're going to cheer for him no matter what. Stipe, tremendous man, though. He is a firefighter still to this day, an active duty firefighter where he sleeps at the fire station for several nights and then sleeps at home while he is in training camp. He's an incredible human being, and I think he could come back for sure after this 2-year layoff and prove to the world that, hey, he's the greatest heavyweight of all time, which is often how we refer to him. So I do think in terms of a comeback, he could do it. Will he get as much love? I'm not sure. I would hope for him because he's a great guy, but I'm not sure if he would.
Boy, that's interesting stuff. That really sounds like a narrative scripted by someone over there at the WWE. An ongoing firefighter versus this guy with a checkered past. Who you rooting for, world? In the meantime, UFC has Usman, Adesanya, Henry Cejudo are all trying to win belts back, and Conor McGregor's supposed to come back soon as well. What's the biggest comeback we should be on the lookout for if it isn't Bones Jones?
It's a great question. Our sport is just full of incredible stories. Yes, Kamaru Usman lost his belt. He looks to challenge the man who took it from him in just less than 2 weeks now in London. So that will be a trilogy between them. Henry Cejudo is really interesting. He is an Olympic champion. He won the belt at 125 pounds and he won the belt at 135 pounds. He's coming off, I believe, a 3-year layoff. At 135, once again, looks to reclaim that title, has talked about going to a third weight class to potentially win that belt. He's definitely one to watch, but a great comeback that was actually a few weeks ago is a woman named Tatiana Suarez, who is just a tremendous, tremendous person and athlete. She was on her way to the Olympics as a freestyle wrestler, was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. Obviously, that derailed her Olympic dream. Then she got into fighting several years later, and then she went from a neck injury to a fully torn knee. Every ligament you can tear, she tore. She was out for 4 years. She came back up a weight class just to see how it would feel and finished her opponent in the second round. So, I mean, we are used to seeing just the absolute fortitude of the human spirit within our sport. And I think that there's no better representative for comeback stories than our UFC fighters.
There's so many wonderful comeback stories, but I'm so looking forward to this Kamaru Usman fight, because just understanding the grasp of you're literally minutes away from being a champion and then you get knocked out on, so I just know he's probably going to try to come back with vengeance. So I can't wait to see that fight.
Pretty much seconds away from, retaining his title. And it's this kick scene around the world and he wakes up saying, what happened? And I think it gave Leon Edwards a lot of confidence. He won the first round, Leon Edwards did, and then obviously secured the finish in the last round. But I think it gave Leon a lot of confidence heading into this third matchup. Like, hey, I already beat him. I know what to do. I can get this. And it's in Leon's backyard. It's in England. So I think this one, it should be a really great story. I selfishly hope it goes several rounds so we get, a really great fight. But I think Kamaru Usman is, if he's anything, it is motivated and dedicated. And, he had a big hand surgery and he's healed from it and he's ready to get his belt back.
Yeah, as a betting man, I'm going to go with the guy who was once the pound for pound best fighter in the world. But speaking of comebacks, will we be hearing more from your podcast, Becoming a Fighter, soon?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. Yes, we're filming, we're recording and working on season 2. It's probably one of my favorite projects that I get to do as a sports broadcast professional. It's diving into how did you become a person who fights in a cage for a living? Obviously everybody's path is different, but they're all extremely unique. I mean, the challenges all of our athletes have overcome, the things that they have lived through, the things that they continue to work through and yet achieve the level of success that they have is so intriguing to me. And I think you don't have to be a fight fan in any capacity to appreciate just the perseverance of their spirits and, who they are and what they could have been into who they actually became.
Hey, Megan, excellent stuff. Thanks for joining us. Like I say, it's an exciting time in the UFC and appreciate the insight on it. Thanks again to Megan Olivi for joining us today. Be sure you check out her podcast, Becoming a Fighter, if you want to hear more from her. And next on the Check Down, Calvin Ridley was just reinstated by the NFL, which means he's coming back to the league in 2023. Good news for Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars.
Don't call it a comeback.
Time for some other comeback stories in the news we need to give a look at this week. This is the Check Down. All right, 5-0, here we go. Kevin Durant didn't miss a step in his comeback from an MCL sprain. He's got the Suns looking like the team to beat in the West. Is the KD and Booker combo enough to win the Suns their first title in franchise history?
Man, Kevin Durant's a really, really good player, man. And, for
you think?
Multiple years, he's always been in the conversation as one of the greatest players, top 5 greatest players, probably the last 10 years in the NBA. And when you join him with like a Stephen Curry, when you join him with a Kyrie Irving, when you join him with a Devin Booker / Chris Paul combination, I think he always has to be in the consideration of winning a championship. I really felt if Kyrie was healthy and Ben Simmons was the Ben Simmons of the past, that it was possible in New York. But obviously that didn't work out. But I think with Phoenix, they're literally one step away, kind of like how Golden State was, even though Golden State won a championship before, but they're one step away from winning a championship. And all Kevin Durant needs is Chris Paul to be healthy through the playoffs. If he has Chris Paul healthy through the playoffs, I think this team is a force to be reckoned with. I think they're very scary, but the reason I don't think they're going to win the championship and is because I think that Jason Tatum is his year. I really just feel it's his year. I think he's going to be the one that wins the championship this year. I think Boston has the team to do it. And you know what's crazy? They're going to win a championship without their coach. But I think that they're good enough to be in the conversation. I think they're good enough to win it, but I just don't think that they're going to.
I'll tell you this. I think the West, after 30 years of complete dominance in the NBA, has now returned to the 80s form when the Celtics with Bird, McHale, and the Chief had to run the gauntlet through good Detroit and Milwaukee and Sixers teams, whereas Magic and company breezed through the 80s West playing teams like the Nugs. I think that's kind of the same effect that's going to be in order here come springtime of 2023. The East is a nightmare. Not a ton of great teams out West. If I'm right about KD making the Suns the best team in the West, boy, I don't think they're going to get a ton of resistance. They could be relatively fresh and catch a really fatigued Boston or Milwaukee team on the other side, or Philly if they should get there as well. This week, wide receiver Calvin Ridley was reinstated after a year-long ban from the NFL for gambling on games. While he was away, Ridley was traded from the Falcons to the Jaguars. Shazier, what should we expect from Trevor Lawrence to Ridley, that specific connection, upcoming autumn 2023?
So when I first seen this trade happen, and the Jags traded for Calvin Ridley, before, during the season, and I was like, man, that's a really good trade. I was like, that's a really good trade for the Jags because Calvin Ridley at that time did not have a number one. Not Calvin Ridley. Trevor Lawrence did not have a number one. But obviously we seen Christian Kirk turn into that type of guy. We see Zay Jones and Evan Ingram. They have a great connection. And now you're adding a true number one in there now with Calvin Ridley. Man, I think it's going to be a great connection with him and Trevor Lawrence because Calvin Ridley, before all this stuff happened, he was one of the best young receivers in the league. I know a lot of people talk about Jamar Chase. They talk about Justin Jefferson. They talk about a lot of these younger receivers. But this is a name that a lot of people forgot about because he's never had a lot of help in Atlanta. The Jags, as long as they can be consistent the whole season, I think Calvin Ridley's going to at least have 1,300 to 1,500 yards receiving.
Wasn't very long ago that the AFC South, it might even still be a punchline, even with Trevor Lawrence there. But be on the lookout for that division rising up collectively. You assume the Texans and the Colts are about to land franchise QBs in the draft. I don't think it's going to be a walkover, and the Titans are a team in transition, it would appear. So a compelling division to watch even before the season begins with the draft upcoming and free agency. It's going to be fun to see what the Jags do to flesh out the roster around Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley. Meantime, Josh Gordon is back, tallying up 6 receptions, 118 yards, a couple of touchdowns, and a 3-point conversion for the XFL's Las Vegas Vipers in a win over the weekend. Shazier, is an NFL comeback next?
I wouldn't be surprised if an NFL comeback is next for Josh Gordon because when he's actually playing football in the NFL, he's a very good player, like extremely good player. He just kept getting in trouble with, when it came to misuse of drugs, and a lot in trouble. So as long as he's, staying off of the stuff that you shouldn't be having while you're playing football, I think that he could be somebody that teams can look forward to a second weapon, a third weapon, because a lot of teams in the NFL, their third weapon receivers aren't as good as people think they are. So I think he could definitely come in and still be a guy that makes something happen. He's just older, so we're going to have to see. But I think he can do it.
My goodness. I mean, listen, I'm all for second chances, third chances, but I mean, he's just downright. You talk about taking drugs. It looks like he's had some of the munchies there. It's a little heavy set is what I'm getting at there. A little stiff. I don't think the NFL is a reasonable option for him at this point, but as they say, you just need one desperate team to reach out to him, and that'll prove me wrong.
Shek, I have a question. Who you taking right now? Josh Gordon or Terrell Owens if you was an NFL team?
I mean, Terrell Owens is what now? 52? I mean, how far are we going to go with this thing?
He just ran a 4.4.
How about neither one? How about ideally, my team isn't in such dire straits that I have to take on a 52-year-old man or Josh Gordon in his 27th go-round in pro football. Kennesaw State qualified for March Madness for the first time in their school's history. Amazingly, just 3 seasons after they went 1-28. Shazier, what's the worst team you've ever been a part of for a whole season in any sport at any level? I mean, is it possible it was the 11-5 Steelers?
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of losing in my career. So I can say I've had 2 teams where I would say they were pretty bad. So my high school football team, not my high school, I'm sorry. My first year at Ohio State, we were 6-7. And then I was on a little league team when I was growing up, and we were not good. We ended up winning like 1 game. And I played running back, but I didn't have any help. And I would score like 2 touchdowns a game, but we just couldn't stop anybody. We couldn't do anything. And we literally just got demolished every single game. That was growing up when I lived in Texas. My mom was like, "Oh, I don't like the league that you're in. We're going to put you in this new league." Yeah, and I hated every single moment of it, you know. But so they moved me back to the old league. But at Ohio State, that was the year that Coach Tressel unfortunately had to leave Ohio State. Terrell Pryor winning the supplemental draft. Our starting running back was suspended. Our starting receiver was suspended. Our starting O-lineman was suspended. Coach Fickle, Luke Fickle, who's the head coach of Wisconsin Badgers right now, was the intern coach. And I just, you know, when you're saying you get dealt a bad hand, man, he got dealt a terrible hand. He had to play with a bunch of freshmen and guys that weren't the superstars, and he had to go into the Big Ten and act like everything was normal. We ended up going 6-7 that year. And I knew he'll be a great coach, but he just we weren't able to turn things around the way he possibly wanted to. And now you see how good a coach he is. He's been winning in Cincinnati, and now he's at Wisconsin. I think he'll do well as well. But yeah, that was probably the worst team I've been on.
6-7, that's dirty. But you know, you mentioned league. The athletic director at my high school, accidentally, we were a single A team in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, in basketball. He signed the freshman basketball team accidentally into a quad A league. So we had guys dunking on us. And everybody on the team pretty much looked like me, and we didn't know what to make of that. We went 1-22 on the season. Our only victory was against the Pittsburgh School of the Deaf. We won by 7 points. It was a great celebration in the locker room that day. The New York Football Giants signed Daniel Jones to a 4-year, $160 million contract and franchise tag Saquon Barkley on Tuesday this week, keeping their 2 offensive stars in New York for at least 1 more season. Shazier, did the Giants get this one right, or these 2 right, I guess?
This situation reminds me very much of the Tennessee Titans situation. And what I mean by that is Ryan Tannehill got all the money off the back of Derrick Henry. And to me, I feel like this is what's happening in New York. Saquon Barkley had a phenomenal year. Daniel Jones had 15 touchdowns and barely turned the ball over, which a quarterback is supposed to not turn the ball over. That's their job. So to me, I think the fact that they gave Daniel Jones $160 million off of 4 years is crazy to me, because he did lead them to the playoffs. They did get a playoff win. So if they're justifying that, hey, if we keep winning with Daniel Jones, if they end up winning the Super Bowl, hey, nobody can be mad at the Giants. But I just don't feel that giving Daniel Jones all this money is going to help your team be the best team. I feel like Saquon Barkley is the reason that they can make all this money, that they can make more money and win, not based off of Daniel Jones. So I think it's right that they got both pieces. They kept both pieces, but I don't feel that Daniel Jones deserved this much money. But at the end of the day, I'm not an owner of the New York Giants.
Well, the pushback on that is, where are you going to go? You're going to reboot at the most important position? Are you going to go play the free agency field? It's kind of a safe play by the Giants on some level there. Where Saquon's concerned, it feels unjust that the guy or the guys who take as many hits as running backs get, that by the time they get to their second contract, they're typically used up. There's not a ton of evidence in the 21st century that it's a good idea to give a long-term second deal to even Derrick Henry, Zeke Elliott, or otherwise. So I think that maybe you go back into the draft and get your running back that way. The other side of it is tagging for 1 year at $10 million, a little bit more than that, is probably a savvy play, given that Saquon has been hurt and is probably relatively fresh at this point. But beyond 2023, maybe they even tag him one more time after this. But after that, Saquon is probably, unfortunately, because of the attrition of pro football in the 21st century, going to be borderline kind of used up. The movie Roadhouse is coming back. Jake Gyllenhaal recorded a fight scene for the movie in the octagon in UFC 285 before Jones and Gane took the stage. 5-0, if you could play any role you wanted in a remake of any 80s movie, which would you choose and why?
One of my favorite movies is House Party growing up. So I'll be one of the guys at House Party because it was just, trying to sneak out the house and have a party. And then it's just you guys having a good time. I thought that was a great movie. And so I'll probably be one of the guys at House Party. I enjoy that movie a lot. And I think I'll be somebody in that movie, or
just be an extra too. You don't want to have to get bogged down learning a bunch of lines either. Just be like an extra hanging around the party the whole time.
Or I'll be the Godfather, so I'll have 4 movies.
Okay, that's also a good idea for you. I like that. What was Wesley Snipes' character in New Jack City? Maybe that could be it for you. I don't know. That might be a guy. You playing a bad guy would be an interesting thing to see. I'm going to go with, Short Round in Indiana Jones Temple of Doom. Dr. Jones is the coolest. To learn at his knee while the bad guy's trying to rip hearts out and everything else. It would be that, or I would replace the guy who played Jimmy Chitwood in Hoosiers, and it would be a Southpaw hero knocking it down at the buzzer to win the Indiana State Championship. I think that would be. I'm learning now from one of the producers. They just remade House Party, and it was bad. That's a note on.
No, I'm the one who said it was bad. I said it was bad.
Oh, okay, that was you.
That's why I will remake it again.
I see. Okay. Hey, the Double Down sandwich is coming back to KFC. The Double Down, of course, as if anybody didn't know this, it's a fried piece of chicken, but then instead of bread, it's got 2 more pieces of fried chicken on it. Shazier, you love your Chick-fil-A. Would you venture out of your comfort zone to try this out?
So I've actually tried a Double Down before when I was younger. And the Double Down is actually phenomenal. It's a really good sandwich. Obviously, it's a meat witch. I don't know, pause. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely a good meal. But you also feel like you're going to have a heart attack after you eat it. So I like it a lot. If Chick-fil-A thinking something like that, I might try it. But I remember when I ate it, my hands were so greasy from grabbing 2 pieces of chicken and eating it. I had it one time and I was like, yeah, this is not a good look for me. So I decided not to have it no more. So I don't think I would do it no more.
All right, listen, you do you. I'll take a bite of it one time just to see how it goes. I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it quite a bit. One more question for you, Shazier. Which Jones brothers' career would you prefer to have? Jon Jones or Chandler Jones? A star defensive pass rusher, making a lot of bank that way, or the greatest light heavyweight and perhaps the greatest MMA fighter period of all time?
That's a tough situation to be in. And the reason I say that is because Chandler Jones is probably one of the most underrated big-time players to ever play the game of football, while Jon Jones is one of the most highly rated fighters of all time. So it's crazy because I feel if Chandler Jones played for the Steelers, he'll be considered one of the greatest D linemen to ever play the game of football. But the fact that he was at the Raiders and then, paid for the Cardinals and then paid for the Patriots.
Patriots, right.
It wasn't the same type of love I don't think he got. And because he would get 10 plus sacks every single year and nobody would talk about him. So I kind of like a little bit of attention, so I might go with Jon, but without all the drug stuff and without all the trouble.
I'm taking Chandler Jones because one thing I can't take is any shots at the moneymaker. All right, that's it for this episode of Don't Call It a Comeback.
Make sure to follow, rate, review the show on wherever you're listening. Check us out on YouTube, on the Wondery channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any episodes. See you all next week.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.